Hey, it's a Soul Whisperer, Amy Shaw here, and today I want to talk about something that's really important. I just hear a lot about it, and a lot of people are making YouTube videos and writing articles and talking about this concept that we create our own reality. So I really want to kind of delve into this, from a shamanic perspective, which isn't going to be the same as, the overarching spiritual perspective. Definitely not the same as the New Age, religious, spiritual type of perspective. I want to talk about it specifically from a shamanic perspective to see if I can bring in some additional information, some insight, some understanding that I personally have. Now, when I say this, I'm not claiming to represent all shamans or shamanism as a whole. It's my path and my understanding of shamanic practice and of what shamanism is. This is something I've been thinking a lot about lately, just because there are elements of mysticism in shamanism. When the shaman goes into a trance state and goes into the spiritual realm or connects with spirit, sometimes information comes through, sometimes experiences are had, and these are transcendental experiences. They sort of take the shaman above the mundane monotony of life, of course, and knowledge and wisdom can come through that's of a higher source, especially if the shaman is going into the upper realms, the upper world. Where there's much more benevolent guides and teachers who are conveying, ancient wisdoms and understanding and insights, that are very deep, meaningful things. So these transcendental experiences can be like mystical experiences. And so there's always going to be threads and elements of mysticism in shamanism. But the difference between a mystic and a shaman, and there is a clear distinction really, is that the shaman is the mediator in between both worlds. So the shaman never stays in the reality or the framework of the upper world experience at all times and forever. They don't bring that element back through and then are constantly in a state of transmitting that understanding and that knowledge. So a lot of these sort of channeled materials that we get, Cryon, the Seth material, the Abraham Hicks material, Paul Selig, all these types of channelers that are channeling spiritual wisdom or higher wisdom, and a lot of it has a very mystical element, and that is it shifts us out of our material reality, our rational material reality, and brings us into this higher reality of oneness, of godness, of eternity, of outside of time, and all that stuff. And those experiences are wonderful. I would never discourage anybody from seeking them or chasing after them or allowing them to express within them. But this is not the core of shamanism. The core of shamanism is to be a mediator between the worlds. So what that means is also being able to go not into the upper realm, but also into the lower realms, or what some people would call the underworld, the dark, shadowy stuff. In actuality, I think the majority of shamanic work is really being able to go into that underworld or into the middle world realm. If you think about the spiritual realm as the astral plane, as a lot of people do, then the astral realm itself, just as a whole, is a reflection, it's a mirror of our material world here on earth. So as above, so below. Everything that manifests here materially on the earth as we're in it is coming as a reflection from what's happening in the astral realm or the spiritual layer of this earth. In core shamanism, Michael Harner's core shamanism, we would call this astral realm actually the middle world. And in this middle world, there's a lot of malevolent spirits, there's a lot of suffering spirits, there's a lot of souls that are trapped there that passed over into the spiritual realm and got stuck and didn't know how to move along. And so this is absolutely the work of the shaman, to go into that middle world, and it's called psychopomp work, to help these suffering spirits to move on, to transition into the higher realms. So the point I want to make about the difference between shamanism and mysticism is that, yes, shamanism has always and probably will always contain elements of mysticism, but itself is not a practice of mysticism. It just can't be. You can't call yourself a shaman and be doing shamanic work and stay in that mystical realm, that higher realm, all the time. It's not possible. You have to bridge the worlds, and when I say the worlds, I mean not just the higher realm, but the middle realm and the lower realm as well, and be able to bring that information back and translate it from the spirit language into actual human language, words that the person that you're working with and trying to heal can understand. And so there's very much a rational, in the moment, what's in front of me aspect to shamanic work. It can't be any other way. If the shaman's so ungrounded that their head's in the clouds all the time and they're constantly having this mystical experience, people that are here living in these human bodies, in these incarnations now at this point, they aren't going to be able to really relate to that at all. You're not going to be able to connect with people. They're probably just going to think that you're a crazy lunatic, and once in a while you say things that sound really cool or might be a little insightful, but they're just barely going to be able to grasp onto that. And so the 95% of the work that you would be doing in that state would be unuseful and unhelpful to people in the immediate. And shamanism is all about serving the community. It's serving the people. It's helping them clear illnesses and emotional disturbances and, incongruences in their physical and their emotional and their spiritual and their energetic bodies. And so it just requires the shaman to be grounded and present and very rational materialist in the approach as they're here walking on this side of the veil. So that being said, here's this question: do we create our own reality? Well, it's an interesting question because there's some indigenous tribes that really believe that the shamans are the ones responsible for dreaming the world into existence. But I want to really make a clear distinction between dreaming and creating. I mean, these are kind of two different things. So, let's take this cup, for example, okay? I'll just give a little backstory on this. I talked about this in another video. I bought this at a metaphysical fair that I was vendoring and actually giving a lecture at. And the woman who started this company, mypositivewater.com, she based this concept on the rice experiment. And I did, again, talk about this in another video. If you're curious about the rice experiment, look it up. It's based on the work of Dr. Emoto. If you have seen the show What the Bleep Do We Know? He's the one who photographed the water. So he photographed water after he had subjected it to different things like prayers, blessings, singings, cursing, real negative heavy metal music. And then he photographed the ice crystals and the actual water molecules themselves. And then he showed us what those look like under the microscope. So based on that idea, people started experimenting with what they call the rice experiment, where they would take rice, cooked rice, freshly cooked rice that was, sterile, and put it in 3 different jars, the same batch in 3 different jars. They would label the jars on the outside. One jar would be hate, one would be love, and one would be neutral. And so the hate jar, every day they would speak negative to it. I hate you, you're ugly, you're gross, you're disgusting, you're rotting, and this. The love one, they would speak love to it. You're beautiful, I love you, you nourish people. They would just say positive things. And then the neutral one, they leave alone. And a lot of people have done this and shared their videos on YouTube. The results that they've gotten, it's pretty astonishing. The results are very, very clear. And another similar concept is the Mythbusters a while back, several years ago actually, did a similar experiment, but it was talking to plants. So they would talk positively to plants, they would talk negatively to plants, or they would just completely neglect the plant. And then they, did this experiment to see what would actually happen to the plant. And of course, very similar results. So the plants that got positive attention, that had music played to them, they flourished. They were green, they were healthy. The ones that had negative attention to them, they died. And, likewise. So it's a similar concept. The fundamental concept behind this, this woman who started this, the rice experiment and the Mythbusters plants experiment, is that we do influence our environment. We influence what is around us. But how does this relate to us creating our own reality? Well, you can look at this and you can say this is half empty, or you can look at this and say it's half full. In that sense, how you look at this is your reality. Your reality is either the cup is half full or the cup is half empty. In that sense, we do create our own reality. But in another sense, where this idea that we create our reality falls down or fails is that as a human being, I have the fortunate capacity to be able to see with my own eyes that both states exist, that this glass is both half empty and as well as half full. And I know that I am consciously choosing to see it as half full. So that is the advantage of being a human being and having a higher cognitive ability, a rational material mind, to be able to deduce and this type of thing. How does this relate to us creating our own reality? Well, it's the same concept, really. This is the reality that I choose to look at, the lens by which I choose to view the world around me. But I also know that I have the capability to try on a different lens and to see the world in a different way if I so choose. Now, this concept is actually the work of shamans. This is the domain that shamans go into. There's many different ways we could talk about it. Some people call it personal myth making. Some people call it narrative. Some people call it neuro-linguistic programming. I mean, there's different aspects and nuances and ways that express, but it's essentially all the same. This is the domain of shamans, and it's part of curse extraction as well. Is, when someone's cursed, they only look through this way. They can only see the world through this way, and they're very entrenched and trapped in that. And part of curse extraction is to be able to remove that lens from that person and be able to allow them to see through the other lens. So yes, this is absolutely the work of shamans. But the distinction that really is important and what I really wanted to talk about today is this idea that we create our own reality. In a sense, as I've demonstrated with the water, we do create our own reality, but by the same token, we are not God. We are co-creators. So in that sense, the prima materia, what's called in alchemy, the prima materia, and I want to make this clear, I'm talking about westernized, modern, urban shamanism. I'm not talking about shamanism where people are highly connected to the earth, where the whole entire tribe lives in a very animistic way, where everybody understands spirits, where the shaman is so intimately connected with the earth and the vibrations and all of that's all expressing through their shamanism. I'm talking about our westernized pillar, our lineage of shamanism. It comes from a very rational, materialist realm. It comes from, as Andrew Camargo's work in the School of Modern Soul Science, it comes from our European lineage of shamanism, which I don't want to go on and on about that because that's not actually what this video is about. But the point is that our lineage, our Western shamanic lineage, is grounded in a rational materialist approach. And there's nothing wrong with that. So a lot of people will criticize, and say, well, how can you be spiritual and also be academic? How can you read a lot of books? Or how can you experience shamanism through reading? Well, because this is our shamanic lineage. It's important for us as modern shamans to be able to bridge the spiritual with the material. And the material culture that we are living in is extremely rational, materialist oriented, and it's very cognitively driven. This is what we value. We value intellect, we value logic, we value cognition. So the shaman, the modern shaman, has to be able to work within that realm and bring back information from the spiritual realm and translate it into that rational materialism. And so this is what a big part of what shamans do. But going back to what I was saying about Do we create our own reality? No, we don't. In alchemy, it's called the prima material. It's the basic material, the basic building blocks from which the alchemist will take and transmute. They will do the transmutation process, okay? This is a metaphor or an allegory for the internal process of getting to the gold, creating the magic. But the prima material is never created by the alchemist. It's gathered and collected from the earth. Okay, so in that sense, there is a one creator, a one source. They're going back to the scientific, the logical, the cognitive mind. I've taken chemistry, I've taken anatomy, I've taken biology, I've taken these types of classes, these hard science classes, even in physics. There's a basic law of chemistry, there's a basic law of matter. And it is a universal law, a fundamental universal law. And the law states that nothing can be created nor destroyed, but only transformed, only transmuted. And so this is very consistent with the alchemists, the European alchemists, which are our shamanic lineage really here in the West. And so that prima material, that core material, we don't create that. We didn't create this water. All we can do is work with it. All we can do is transmute it. We can turn it into ice. We can turn it into steam. We can do a lot of things with it. But fundamentally, we cannot create water. Now, there's some people that are of a more mystical mind and they think, well, we're living here in this matrix and this is all an illusion and this life that we have, everything around us is just a dream itself. What I have to say about that is that, yes, to some degree, there's truth in that. But no, to a larger degree, there is mistruth in that. And the reason that I say that is because we chose to come here. If you want to really get into a higher spiritual mind and start talking about on the soul level and the higher sciences and our purposes here, our karma here and this type of thing, we chose to come here. Shamans chose to come here to be of service to humanity. In the same way, like the bodhisattva is the enlightened individual who chooses to come and continue to suffer for the sake of humanity. The bodhisattva is a very resonant archetype for the shaman as well. So the shaman comes and many shamans have been shamans in previous lives or parallel lives, right? Because time actually doesn't exist. So, this idea of past is not really past, it's simultaneous or going on at the same time. So in current lives, current alternative lives, current timelines, whatever, however you want to conceive this, many shamanic individuals have also performed that role in other lives. And so to be the shaman, although you are chosen by the spirits in this life, and that's what sort of sets off the shamanic expression in this life, this current now life. But it's also important to know that we are here in this consciousness right now at this time. I am in a human body. I chose to be in a human body, and as such to have a human experience. I've also heard people say that, well, shamans aren't really human. I don't agree with that because we're here, we're in human body. We're just as human as anybody else. Shamans have a soul? Yes, just as everybody else has a soul. Is that soul unique? Is it the expression of it unique? Yes. I think in my understanding of it, shamans have a certain soul shape. And that is partially what they come in with, and it's also partially the alchemical work that happens in the initiation process. It's all part of the deal. But being different doesn't mean that they're better, it doesn't mean that they're superior, it doesn't mean that in any way, because Source, God, is in everything and everybody. It runs through all of us. But that's not to say that we are creators. At best, and at best, when I say at best, I really mean at best, we're co-creators. In other words, we can take the prima materia, the water, and we can put it in a cup and we can choose to either use this as a lens of half empty or half full. And if we choose to see it as half empty, then through that lens, we will create our reality based on what we see. But you understand that this is entirely subjective. Does this mean that every human being on the planet is having a different reality? Well, yes and no. You know, on September 11th, when the World Trade Centers were allegedly hit by airplanes that were hijacked by terrorists, and thousands of people died that day, did those people create that reality? No. They had all separate realities in the sense that they had different experiences of what happened to them that day. They had different family members that they were thinking about and different actions that they took and all of that. So they each had unique and different experiences, but collectively they all had the experience of being there in the World Trade Center, being there in those planes and dying on September 11th. They did not create that reality. They did not wish it into experience. They did not dream it into experience. They suffered it because somebody else chose to take an action that resulted in a consequence. And so this is why I'm talking about this, because it's extremely dangerous. The word for it, and, you know, again, we can talk about this academically and, you know, criticize it because there's labels and there's words and we're thinking about it. I mean, philosophy itself is a very cognitive, sort of logical, academically driven way to make sense of the world around you. And certain isms definitely come from a philosophical way of understanding and analyzing things around us. Well, solipsism is this very dangerous idea that everything is a projection. So this idea that we create our own reality is totally rooted in solipsism. So that's saying that every person's reality is completely subjective and we can't ever find an objective truth or have a shared similar experience without co-agreeing to that experience. Again, a lot of the channeled material kind of gets into this and goes that way with it. And there is truth to that. I'm not trying to like discredit it all and say that there's these mystics that come through or that channel information, that there's not absolute truth to much of what they're saying. There is truth to that, okay? In that sense that we are co-creating a reality. But the key is that we're co-creating it. We do not create the prima materia. We do not have the innate power or ability to mold, to create that, okay? We just take what's given to us and we work with it. And to go around and tell people, well, you create your own reality is very, very dangerous for two reasons. One, it potentially can continue to blame the victim. So it does not allow people to actually get out of that ouroboros loop that they might be stuck in. How you help someone get out of that loop is not by blaming them, not by telling them, well, you created this reality, so uncreate it, but by actually empowering them and teaching them how to move beyond looking at the glass half empty into looking at it half full. This is a transmutation process. But the point I'm making over and over here again is that the prima materia, the water, we have no control over that. It is what it is. Okay? And so we can only work with it in a way. And again, this is the domain of shamans. This is where the actual magic comes, is in this, and being able to help guide someone in transmuting something and to understand. Look, here's the bottom line of it too. If I say that all reality is subjective and that I create my own reality, then in actuality what you're saying is the spirit world doesn't even exist because I created it. I created it myself. It's all a projection from my own mind, my own imagination, and all the experiences that I have in the spiritual world, you know, working with the ancestors, working with my helping spirits, you know, working with other people's, the ancestral spirits, you know, the spirits of the land, all that shamanic work, it's all for naught because I created it all in my head. It's just my subjective reality that I'm projecting out into the world. I mean, essentially, if that's what you believe and that's the route that you take in your philosophy, then you're cutting the shaman off at the knees and you're making them completely useless and pointless. There's nothing that a shaman can do, no power that a shaman can have, no work that a shaman can do that can be legitimate or experienced by anybody else, because it's just me and my subjective reality. And I might as well not even try to do the work because there's no point. See, that's the danger of solipsism. The other danger, and I think perhaps even the bigger danger, is that solipsism will encourage people to not take personal responsibility for themselves. If everything is a subjective reality, then the guy that breaks into my house and puts a gun to my head and murders me, that was my subjective reality. He had nothing to do with it. I created that reality and I wanted that to happen, and therefore not only am I not a victim, but he's not responsible for any of it. Which, that's a really extreme example that I'm giving just to demonstrate, the faultiness of solipsism. But if we pan that out into, more day-to-day life, it becomes really dangerous. You can have a lot of people saying, well, gosh, you're offending me. You're doing something that's really offending me. Well, that's just your projection. Whatever you see in me that you don't like, that's a projection of something in yourself that you don't like. And so what happens is it's like a mirror. There's no ability to actually like problem solve or conflict resolve, or it's just a constant like blaming and projection, blaming and projection, blaming and projection. So it's like, okay, I'm rubber, you're glue, whatever bounces off of me sticks to you. So if you're telling me that I'm doing something wrong, or I'm doing something that's offending you, or I'm hurting you in some way, well, that's your problem, because that's just your projection. It's just coming from you. So you see, I'm deflecting total accountability and responsibility. And obviously that lacks integrity, and it's extremely dangerous for shamanism. Shamanism is a really high level of expertise, and I don't, again, I'm not saying that to say like shamans are better. I'm saying like, okay, if I go into my art room right now and I paint something, it's going to look terrible because I don't have the practice to really be the artist that I want to be, like a real magical realism artist. I have to go in that room and practice every day for years and years and years to develop the skill and the technique to really be able to bring that painting to life and make it look real and amazing. I don't have that kind of dedication. So in my mind, I want to be that, but I'm not that dedicated. Shamanism is no different. You don't just wake up and one day, oop, you're a shaman. No, even in indigenous cultures, the calling can be like some catastrophic shamanic initiation. All that initiation does is serve to the community, to the individual, to identify that, wow, this person's the shaman. This person is the one being called by spirits. And at that point, that person goes to the elder shaman, the master shaman, and starts apprenticing. That apprenticeship takes decades. Decades. It's not just, oh, you woke up, something happened, you had a near-death experience, now you're a shaman. It doesn't work like that. Even and especially in Western culture, it doesn't work like that. So shamanism itself, for someone to come and say, I am a shaman, you have to really have a high level of experience, of technique, of insight, of discernment, of all these things. And it takes years and years and years to actually cultivate that, to get to a point where you're effective and grounded and have integrity in your shamanic practice. And so the point I was making with that is that if somebody is coming from this place of solipsism, of, well, everything is just a projection, you're just projecting that. What you see in me, that's a projection just showing the ugliness that's inside of you. No, I mean, that's really, really dangerous. That's not to say that people don't project stuff, because they do. But the discernment that is required to be a shaman is at such high level. A shaman must know thyself, like so intimately that they know immediately what's a projection and what's not. And when it's not a projection and it like is a flaming arrow that comes in, the shaman must be able to be so self-controlled to not be able to not be triggered by that, to not react to that, but to go within and do the transmutation work of clearing that out and, allowing that medicine to change the shaman to be that much better. So it's an ongoing work. To be a shaman, it's an ongoing work of self-healing, of knowing thyself, of clearing stuff to become more and more and more of that hollow bone, or that clear conduit and channel for spirit. But the point I want to make about it, though, is that we can't go around and say, we create our own reality. We can't tell this to other people in that and use it in that way. We have to use it in the way of acknowledging that, yes, we create our own reality through the lenses by which we choose to see our reality. And so part of the shamanic work in the domain of shamans is to help transmute that, to create story around this, to move the individual from this point to this point in a way of grace, in a way of restoration, in a way of soul retrieval, in a way that honors them and is very gently but precise and delicate in making that transition happen. But again, the point that I just want to keep drilling home is this prima materia of this water. We do not control this. Some degree we may choose to it prior to our incarnation. And everybody's connected. We all play a part in each other's lives in facilitating that. That guy that walks through my door and points a gun at me and shoots me, that's part of his karma. That's part of his, path in this life. And he will continue on in his path in other lives, dealing with that and working through that and all of that stuff. But the point is, there's consequence to that. So going back really quick to this idea of, that this life, this everything around us, it's just part of being in the matrix, and, that it's not the real reality. It's just actually the dream that we're living and this kind of stuff. Again, what I want to say about that is that to a degree, there's truth in that. Yes, there is illusion here. Yes, people, human beings, can get bogged down in the heaviness, in the illusion. They can get attached to it in a sense. Really what that means is that they're failing to connect with their soul self, that they haven't done the work in transmuting the ego self, and they haven't been able to anchor in that connection with their higher self, their soul self. But we can't always judge that externally. We can't always see right off the hand that's, someone's, individuated. They've incarnated their higher self. We can't always see that. We have to lean into that. And so it can be insulting, for people to go around and say, exit the matrix, or I'm not in the matrix. The truth of it is, I'm not seeing anybody that's like literally floating around on earth. I don't see anybody who's like Jesus Christ and who's like literally like walking on water and doing these kind of things, or levitating, or I don't know, maybe Chris Angel can actually levitate. I don't know, but you don't see too many people doing that. I don't see anybody doing that actually, and that has that level of mastery. So as far as I can tell, when I look around, whether it's in the matrix or out of the matrix, or however you want to look at it, I pretty much see myself surrounded by human beings having a human experience. And I'm okay with that. I'm not trying to like transcend that or escape it or get out of it. I'm pretty clear about my purpose here on this earth, and that is to serve. It's to serve human beings, to sit and break bread with human beings, to pray with human beings, to be present with them in their suffering, and to help them, guide them in every way that I can to, transmute their stuff, to work through their karma and, incarnate their higher self and understand their own purposes here. To me, that's the work of shamanism. And so to go around and say, like, we create our own reality, it just really cuts me off at the knees, and it's not a perspective that I choose to embrace. And I just wanted to make that clear today. I wanted to talk about that. So I hope that this made sense to you, and maybe it didn't resonate with you. Maybe you think that I don't know what I'm talking about. Maybe you are one of those people that, really likes to have that mystical philosophy and sort of float through life thinking that this is all illusion and I'm creating it all. And good luck to you, is all I can say. I, don't find that approach to resonate with me, and I don't feel that it's part of my purpose here in life. It's not a language set that I use, and again, although there is some truth in it, I just don't feel from my shamanic practice that is the way to approach people or to look at the experience they're having. It's definitely not a compassionate, benevolent, or wise way to deal with suffering, to deal with pain and trauma, by telling somebody, well, you created this reality, so just uncreate it. Definitely not. And I would caution you that if you're working with a shaman that's telling you these things or having this approach, you're working with someone that's not compassionate, that doesn't understand things on the soul level, in the way that they need to be understood. And this might not be a person, although they might be temporarily helpful for you and offer you those little glimpses of enlightenment or wisdom. In the long term, you're probably not going to experience a lot of healing with that mentality or going that route, which is really interesting, because when you look at the channelers, like Seth, the Jane Roberts stuff, profound stuff. I mean, it's very heady stuff. It's very quantum physics-y in its approach. And in that sense, it's not inconsistent with shamanism. There's a lot of elements of quantum physics in shamanism as well. Understanding the spiritual world and the dimensions, and, it's a different language. It's a different way of talking about it, but the experiences are very similar. So again, like I said, there is a lot of mysticism and a lot of spiritism, a lot of, those things happening in shamanism. But the difference is how the channeler, how do they practically incarnate that, or anchor in the knowledge and the wisdom in a way that actually really does help people or move them. I'm not saying people don't get helped. I'm sure that people that go and watch Abraham Hicks at seminars, and by the way, those cost a whole lot of money. I'm sure the people that go there walk away and they feel good. They feel inspired. They may have had some sort of movement, some blockages removed for a time being. I'm not saying that people aren't helped by that, but that's not shamanism. That's the point really that I want to make. It's not shamanism. And yes, we are all one, and yes, we all have creator in us and all these things. I'm not denying that. But there does need to be distinctions made between things. It's part of our experience here on this earth in human bodies right now at this time, is to make distinctions, to understand boundaries, what they are, why they're needed, and to work within those and between them and all that stuff. So again, I hope that I didn't ramble too much. I know I kind of reiterated a lot because I'm really passionate about this. I feel like it's something that really needed to be said and addressed. And maybe you don't resonate with it, maybe you do. Either way, I had the opportunity here to express it, and I hope that it made sense to you. As always, you're free to question, comment, get a hold of me, whatever. You can leave comments down below the video. You can reach out to me. My Facebook is /shamanic services. You can email me at shamanicservices@amykshaw.com. It's AIMEEK and then Shaw, SHAW.com. You can message me through Facebook. There's a lot of different ways that you can get a hold of me. So as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope that you have a really, really blessed day, and I look forward to continued conversations about this.